Hello, group. This is my first narrated PowerPoint presentation, so I hope it goes smoothly and I don't mess up or anything. But if I do, I'll try to recover. But this is the Growing the Post-Traditional Student Population case analysis at Cornerstone University. And so hopefully you enjoy. I'm going to start off here by doing a case study read. Below I'll have the key players just so that you have that in front of you as I read the case study. So I'll go ahead here. Cornerstone University is a private Midwest evangelical institution of 3,500 traditional undergraduate students and 1,500 post-traditional adult students. They're in the process of launching an initiative to double their post-traditional student population over the next few years. Cornerstone is a tuition-dependent private institution with about 92% of its operating costs coming from tuition revenue and only about 8% coming from endowment funds. And the focus here is on their post-traditional population of students. Their post-traditional offerings comprise of adult undergraduate programs as well as a number of graduate programs. And enrollment has been steady at about 1,500 students for the past 8 years. Post-traditional students make up a burgeoning market as many competitor schools employ a robust marketing and recruitment strategy in place for adult learners. And although Cornerstone is not as large as its competitors, the school overall has a solid reputation when it comes to academics, faculty engagement, and student satisfaction. A committee made up of 4 individuals, the 4 individuals you see here, discusses the option of partnering with an outsourced recruitment agency to help grow their post-traditional population. The committee is led by Paul, 55 years of age, Dean of the College of Adult and Graduate Studies, Rachel, 49, VP of Strategic Initiatives, Dan, 45, Director of Enrollment, and Carla, 37, Academic Program Director for the Adult and Graduate offerings. In the committee's first meeting, it was unanimously decided that the growth of the post-traditional population is a much-needed endeavor to improve financial stability. Rachel's desire is to seek out enrollment agencies that strategically partner with schools in bolstering marketing and recruitment efforts. So this is a third-party agency. In her previous position at a comparable school in the Midwest, she found this partnership to be fairly successful in growing their respective adult graduate department. Rachel stated, "I believe we should entertain an enrollment agency to help us grow our post-traditional population. I've seen how some of these agencies have grown enrollment in such a short amount of time. We hired an agency at the school I worked at previously, and I think it was fairly successful overall. Financially, I think we're in a position where this quick growth is imperative." Paul echoed this sentiment, saying, "We have a great product here at Cornerstone, but I think we have been limited in the past with processes and efficiencies within enrollment. I'm curious to see how some of these enrollment agencies can help streamline these processes and create a wider funnel of students." Dan confirmed the growth opportunity, but given his enrollment acumen and rapport with the current enrollment team, offered some concerns. He says, "From a process approach, there are a number of things we can do to speed up our response time to prospective students, but I worry about the message a third-party agency is conveying to our prospective students. I think the most difficult aspect is the fact that Cornerstone has a strong culture and a respectable brand, and I wonder how effective it will be to have a third-party recruiter represent this." Rachel replied, "You have a point, but how much can we trust our current staff in increasing enrollment in this arena when they've been constantly struggling to stay afloat these past few years? If we want to be quick with this enrollment growth, I don't see how our current operations will be able to accomplish this when they're barely meeting their numbers now." Dan replied, "I appreciate your assessment, Rachel, but I believe you're making a big assumption here. You don't know our team. There's a bigger story behind the numbers, and I'm not sure it's fair to pin it entirely on the staff's competency. My point is, we haven't even completed a thorough diagnostic of the current bottlenecks in our operations. Low numbers could mean underperforming staff, but it could just as very well mean low leads, inefficient and slow processes, etc. I believe we carefully hired our staff to represent our brand and product, and they do that very well. Carla chimes in, and she also demonstrated concern as well from the academic delivery perspective. She stated, "Also, Rachel, we all agreed to focusing on growing our post-traditional population, but we all did not get the sense that this has to be as quick as you're making it sound. Even if we were to have a quick influx of enrollment, I worry how we are to accommodate this from an academic perspective. Would we have to hire more faculty in a flash? Would we have to redesign our online and face-to-face courses to accommodate more students? Overall, how do we get more students in such a quick turnaround time without watering down our product?" So Rachel and Paul press the need again to quickly improve financial stability, but Dan and Carla are concerned about the quick turnaround time. They're also concerned about brand reputation and watering down academics. Dan pushes back on the strategy, but offers little to no suggestion on improving enrollment. The idea of focusing on improving current assets is vaguely proposed by Dan, but Rachel is hoping to see results a lot sooner. The debate for whether or not to explore third-party recruitment agencies continues. That is the case study here, and I'll go on to a little bit of analysis here. Let's go ahead. Here's the university profile analysis, recapping from what the case study had talked about. Cornerstone's a private Midwest evangelical institution, 3,500 traditional undergraduate students, but the focus on this case study is the 1,500 adult post-traditional students that they have in that department. The interesting aspect, the focus on financial stability is heightened because it is tuition dependent. It's a private institution, 92% of its operating costs coming from tuition revenue, only 8% coming from endowment funds, with that high percentage coming from tuition revenue. That makes financial stability an even more important topic. Post-traditional enrollment has been steady, about 1,500 students for the past 8 years, so that's really plateaued. It's steady, which is good, but they're looking for growth here, which could be difficult. The good news here about this university and its reputation, it does have a reputable brand from alumni, students, and the community, so that's good. And what was mentioned in the case studies, that it's not as big as the competitors in the region, but at least it's well received as far as its academics. So we do a little character analysis. First, I want to talk about Rachel. If you recall, she's the VP of Strategic Initiatives. A few bullet points here. She is strategy and finance oriented. She brings into the case analysis experiences of success with a third-party agency at a previous school, but she gives little analysis as to how Cornerstone would see that same benefit. She says that she's had success at another school, but just because there was success there does not equate success here. There are definitely a lot of difference between school to school. She doesn't really recognize those things there. Overall, she sees only financial implications of the strategy, a big focus on that, almost tunnel vision on the financial implication, which is very important and much needed, but without looking at the bigger picture. Her agenda is quick growth, but this may not have been warranted originally when they talked about growing their post-traditional market. It was made mention that they all agreed to focus on post-traditional growth, maybe double the size in a few years, but that's a vague time frame. She is very adamant on making this a quick turnaround time, and she voiced that out of the group. And she also makes assumptions about the current enrollment numbers, and questioned, if you recall, she questioned the competency of the team that is currently enrolling students, and made assumptions that maybe the fault had lied with them, without really digging deeper into the issue. So Rachel, very strategy oriented, focused on the finances, business savvy, wanting to have a quick turnaround time as far as growth. Had success in the past with this recruitment agencies, And if you're not familiar, a little bit of background here. A little bit of background. Recruitment agencies, they take over essentially recruitment. They're like a third-party group that takes over, and they actually recruit. They don't actually work for the school, but they just recruit students for your school, and so that's what the success she's had here. Looking at Dan here, Dan is the director of enrollment. He is enrollment oriented. He has that enrollment acumen, and he has the solid rapport with his current team. He does a good job at looking at enrollment growth from different angles, taking into consideration the impact that a third party can have on a school's brand and reputation. He's concerned about other outside representatives talking about their school and representing their brand and reputation, has some concern there. He also does a good job at looking at enrollment challenges from different angles as well. What that means is he fired back at Rachel when she assumed that low numbers were a reflection on just the team's competency or work ethic. He wanted to address maybe it's other things too. Maybe it's low leads, maybe our processes are inefficient, and so he did a good job at looking at that from different angles. Overall, he offers some good insight, but he does come across as a little defensive in his assessment, and though he understands the context well, he does little to make alternative suggestions, given that this is his bailiwick. This is his wheelhouse, his area of expertise, and though he's defensive about what's going on in his team and has good context, he offers a kind of a vague suggestion, or doesn't really do much as far as planning for the future. Carla is the academic program director, responsible for academic quality, faculty, program offerings. She's academics oriented with a perspective from faculty and course design. She makes a solid point about time frame of strategy. When she was concerned about needing to hire faculty in a quick turnaround time, and her suggestion or her insight, would we be watering down the product if we had to just hire a lot of faculty and quickly reformat our course offerings to accommodate a large influx of students? So she was very concerned about that. And she does a good job at offering a big picture perspective on the school's product overall, product quality. Difficult to really identify an area of weakness, but I think she could have provided some assessment on what particular programs were strong, which ones needed renewal, and what other popular programs are in the market that are not currently being offered by Cornerstone. She would have a very good perspective on what programs at the school they want to continue. They want to continue with their strength in enrollment, with the popularity. If there's any programs they need to reassess as far as the demand, the need, and if there's any programs that they could be offering as far as enrollment growth. Carla did not make much mention of that. I'm going to take an alternative angle analysis from a trustee and administrative perspective and analyze this case study from some of the information that was presented. A first plan of action, as a trustee, looking at Dan's comment specifically, we need to complete a thorough diagnostic of the challenges and bottlenecks of current enrollment operations. If you recall from the case study, Dan was frustrated, a little bit defensive that Rachel was jumping to the conclusion that the team was underperforming, and he wanted to make the point that, well, why would we jump to hiring this third party right away? We don't even know what issues or bottlenecks are within our department yet. So let's at least figure that out. And from Dan's comment, that's one of the first things from a trustee perspective we'd like to complete. Let's complete a thorough diagnostic. What are the challenges? What are the bottlenecks? Where do people need to be trained? What are some processes that need to be refined? Let's do that diagnostic first. Diagnose and determine primary areas of challenge, which would include these components here. What are the enrollment staff competencies? Do we need to develop them, train them? What are some areas that we need to improve on? Process efficiencies, that includes how soon we get turnaround times on different processes. How soon do we touch base with students? What kind of CRM is being used, or customer relationship management tools, and Are our process efficient overall? Lead flow has to do with, from an enrollment perspective, how many students are raising their hand and contacting Cornerstone, and are interested. That's the lead flow. How do we assess if that's healthy or not? Program offerings, going back to Carla's expertise. Let's do a diagnosis of what programs are strong and what programs need renewal. Superfluous expenditures. Let's diagnose and see where a lot of money is being wasted, and how we can redirect that money into other things that probably need some attention, and any other things. So first plan of action, let's do a diagnosis, determine some of the challenges in these areas. Next, formally identify and agree on a realistic time frame for increasing enrollment goals. In the case study, it was said that they wanted to double their enrollment in a few years. Well, that was a very generic time frame. And then that which led to this misunderstanding, where Rachel is pressing the case of, let's do a quick turnaround time. We want to have a quick influx. We want to do this quickly. And Carla fired back, kind of saying, well, we all do want to focus on growing this, but none of us got the same impression that we wanted it to be as quick as you're making it sound. So now let's actually formally identify a plan of action. Let's agree on a realistic time frame. If we want to double enrollment, is that 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the case may be? Let's strategically put this on a time frame. And then if needed, last bullet point, if needed, let's seek out third-party consulting to improve process efficiencies, streamlining, program renewal, technology implementation, increasing lead flow. Now, the point here that differentiates from third-party recruiting agencies is that third-party recruiting agencies will simply come in and take over your processes. They will act as your enrollment recruiters. They will do everything, and you essentially give up a percentage of your tuition revenue to them when they come in and take over. It'll be this third-party recruiter that are talking and representing your school to students. This last bullet point differentiates by saying, let's seek out third-party consulting, which is more so using whatever money that is in the funding or in the budget to have some consulting that comes in and looks at our process and identifies areas where it can be more efficient, where it can be more streamlined. There's a lot of consulting that has to do with what new technology should we be using in our processes, going back to what kind of software or whatever things we use to be more efficient overall, increasing lead flow and whatnot. So consulting is different than actual third-party overtaking of a certain workflow. And so that might be something that could be exercised from this perspective, from the perspective of a trustee. And then some further strategic suggestions. And as I as I looked at this entire project, it hit close to home because of a lot of things that are taking place within my line of work, and I want to offer some strategic suggestions. What I call it is a call to organic growth. When I think of third-party recruiting agencies that come over and take over part of your line of work, I don't see that as an organic thing. And I think organic growth is really the best measure for sustainability. And what that means is preserving the reputable brand of the school by continuing to work off the core values that lead to high student satisfaction. This identity cannot be compromised. So when we do not opt for a third-party recruiting agency, what we're doing is we're preserving what we're doing well as a school. What is Cornerstone doing well? Why is there high student satisfaction? Let's preserve those values and work off of that and then improve processes, internal efficiencies, and saving money and keeping tuition costs low, and working towards growing from there rather than having a third-party group just inject our enrollment numbers. And what the implications of organic growth are, what happens is it frees the school from financial and contractual ties with a third-party recruiting agency with regard to future tuition revenue. I alluded to earlier that when a third-party agency comes in, you have a contractual tie with them. They take X percentage of your tuition revenue. And that's a big commitment, and it can be a scary commitment when they're taking your tuition revenue away. Another implication: seek out consulting for improving processes. I mentioned that in the previous slide. Doesn't mean that they come and take over, but you could still seek out consulting that does not include compromising future tuition revenue. Stabilize and or lower tuition costs by identifying and eliminating wasteful expenditures. If there's any expenditures or processes or anything that seem superfluous or wasteful, we need to identify those things and become more fiscally sound. And what that lends towards is the ability to either stabilize or lower tuition costs, lowering overhead. That's important as well. Tuition, being competitive in the market, if we want to grow our post-traditional market, we also have to be competitive from a tuition standpoint. Another point here is ensure that increased enrollment goals align with continued success in academic delivery. This goes back to Carla's point when she worried that a huge uptick in enrollment would water down the product. Well, let's ensure that if we do have enrollment goals to increase enrollment goals, ensure that our academic delivery is not compromised. That academic delivery, whatever's working there, is still remain successful, whether it's student to teacher, faculty, or student to faculty ratio. Let's not water down the product. Let's take it slow. Ensure that that if we do increase enrollment, we don't compromise on that. And build from the talents in place that are currently embodying the school's reputation well. This means supporting and developing the current enrollment staff and faculty, and also the careful hiring of new staff and faculty. This goes back to the human element of building off talents, because essentially so far the school has a great reputation, a great brand, and that reputation and brand comes from the talents in place that are embodying the school's values, the faculty, the staff that work with students day in and day out. If you have a good reputation there, I think reputation is one of the most important assets of a school in difficult times within higher ed. So if a school's reputation is well, do everything to continue to preserve that. And by doing that, what that also means is building on the talents of the people that represent your brand and reputation. I think that's a very important strategic play, because, like I said, firstly, a school's reputation and brand is probably one of the most important assets it has. And secondly, that's also important because when you continue to have organic growth based off reputation, that growth is more sustainable in the long run. It may be slower than a third-party agency who can come in and just inject you with higher enrollment numbers through some means, but it may be slower organic growth through building off of talents, but it's more sustainable. If you do grow, that growth is sustainable, it's workable, and it's I think a healthier growth than just injecting it with a high uptick in enrollment because a third-party agency came in and did it for us. That's important. Sustainability, financial sustainability is important. That's it. I think this presentation went a little bit longer than anticipated, but thanks for listening, and I look forward to the comments and how we can look at this from other perspectives. Thank you.